In the silent carriage, filled with passengers bearing solemn expressions, a baby's cry instantly tensed everyone up. A man even stood up, snatched the baby from a woman's arms, and prepared to throw the baby out of the carriage. However, seeing this scene, people did not step forward to stop the man but instead blocked the woman trying to catch up. It wasn't until the woman agreed to leave with her child that two strong men chose to let go. The man then returned the child to her and immediately opened the carriage door, forcing the mother and child out, holding her child. The woman looked forward fearfully as if afraid of some terrifying thing, but she could only walk into the darkness with everyone's cold gaze on her, her breathing becoming careful and guarded. Yet, at this moment, the baby's pacifier inappropriately fell to the ground. Suddenly, terrifying screams echoed through the dark tunnel, frightening the woman into running back, but it was already too late. Not long before, an exploration team had discovered an ancient cave, and the ancient creatures living within were accidentally awakened by them. These bloodthirsty monsters emerged and devoured the entire exploration team upon their awakening. Then, swarms of monsters burst from the ground and began attacking densely populated cities. At 3 a.m., Ally was suddenly woken up by her mother. When she arrived in the living room, she found her family anxiously gathered around the TV. The news was broadcasting an emergency message, reporting that a terrifying creature had attacked the town, leaving a trail of bodies wherever the monster went. There was a horrific video of the family trapped in the car surrounded by the screams of the creature, and before she died, the woman warned everyone not to make any noise. The news also urged everyone to stay indoors. Suddenly, a noise came from outside, and countless military helicopters flew overhead. Hugh had a bad feeling and quickly told them to silence their phones and stay quietly inside, waiting for rescue. But Uncle Glenn didn't want to sit around waiting to die. He suggested they pack up and leave immediately. After all, the news said that no sound should be made, implying that the noisy city was even more dangerous. Hearing this, everyone thought it made sense and immediately packed up to head for the countryside for refuge. When they got on the road, they could see countless monsters circling over the city, which had already turned into a hell on earth. Because of the long journey, they came to a petrol station to fill up their tanks. But in the apocalypse, there are always those who seek to profit from chaos. A man suddenly appeared with a shotgun and threatened them to hand over their car keys. Luckily, Glenn was prepared before they left. He shot the man in the thigh, and then their dog pounced on the man. The injured man lost all his arrogance and began begging them for help, knowing he'd be dead for sure if the monster showed up. But Glenn obviously wasn't going to save him and even took his weapon before leaving. The family continued towards the outskirts of the city until dawn, but soon they found that the road ahead was blocked by people trying to escape the city. Seeing this, Glenn decided to change the route, leading Hugh's family through a mountain road. Unexpectedly, a herd of wild animals suddenly crossed the road. Glenn, driving in front, instinctively swerved, but the car lost control and flipped down the slope. Hugh and his wife, Kelly, hurried down to check and found that the car was severely damaged and Glenn was injured and stuck. Unable to move, Hugh tried to open the car door, but no matter how hard he tried, it was futile. Kelly tried to call for help, but no one answered. Clearly, in the apocalypse, rescue was impossible. With no other option, Hugh tried to pry the car door open with a crowbar, but the severely deformed door wouldn't budge. Not wanting to hold them back, Glenn resorted to threatening his brother of many years with a handgun, telling him to leave with his family immediately. Hugh knew this wasn't a solution. He had to find cutting tools to rescue Glenn, so he had no choice but to leave for the time being. But as soon as they got back in the car, the dog seemed to sense danger and started barking furiously at the air. And the keen ally also felt something was wrong.
Turn it off!
What?
The moment Hugh turned off the engine, a monster suddenly pounced on them. However, the dog didn't stop barking, successfully attracting more monsters. The monsters kept slamming into the car, leaving cracks on the windshield. And in an instant, the entire roof was covered with densely packed monsters. As the monsters were about to break through the windows, a few gunshots suddenly rang out at the critical moment. It turned out to be Glenn. Knowing they were in danger, so he chose to sacrifice himself to draw all the monsters to him. As more and more monsters gathered, Glenn was quickly devoured alive, but the dog kept barking, and reluctantly, for the safety of his family, Hugh had to open the car door and let the dog out. Soon after, the outside finally became quiet. Hugh signaled everyone to continue staying silent. Then he slowly opened the car door and stepped out to check if the monsters had really left. Just as he was looking around, his grandmother, who had asthma, couldn't help but cough. Although Kelly quickly handed her the asthma inhaler, the sound attracted a monster. Hugh looked at the monster on the car roof and then at the crowbar on the ground. An idea instantly flashed in his mind. He also wanted to test his theory, because he noticed the monster, despite being right in front of him, didn't choose to pounce. It seemed the monsters didn't have eyes and could only locate by sound. Hugh carefully stepped back, then slowly bent down to pick up the crowbar, and he threw it with all his might towards the distance. The monster that heard the sound immediately pounced towards the crowbar, slamming into it furiously, and upon realizing it wasn't food, it immediately flew away. It seems, just as he had guessed, the monsters were completely blind but had exceptionally developed hearing. Back in the car, Hugh quickly shared this discovery with everyone, and obviously, it was good news for them. Ally had lost her hearing due to an accident, and to communicate with her normally, their family had learned sign language and had long been accustomed to a quiet life. Then Hugh went down to see if Glenn could be saved, only to find Glenn had been devoured beyond recognition. Given the circumstances, Hugh decided to set the car on fire, making his brother sacrifice one last time. The burning car quickly attracted the attention of the monsters and exploded, killing them all, while Hugh's family took the opportunity to leave. Because the car noise was too loud, they had no choice but to proceed on foot. Before dark, Hugh spotted a farm through his binoculars, so they immediately headed there, planning to stay for the night. The farm was lit up, indicating the farmer was still there, and the gate was securely locked. Hugh gently pushed it, only to find several bells hanging on top. The sound of the bells also attracted a monster, scaring Hugh and his group into quickly crouching to the side. But seeing a few strangers trespassing, the farmer came out with a shotgun, loudly warning them to leave. The farmer seemed unaware that the world had been overtaken by monsters. As expected, no sooner had the farmer finished speaking than several monsters entangled her. Her shotgun was of no use, and she was quickly overwhelmed by the monsters. The brutal scene was too much for Hugh's family to bear watching. Afterward, they found a sewer entrance nearby that led into the farm. For safety, Hugh decided to go in first to scout the path, but he didn't notice a rattlesnake inside the pipe. After successfully entering the farm, Hugh found the house empty and the dining table still laden with food, so he signaled for them to come in quickly. Kelly had their young son, Jude, go in front of her while she covered the rear, but it wasn't long before Jude spotted the rattlesnake. The rattlesnake immediately started rattling its tail as a warning, unaware that it was about to become prey to another predator. A monster that was feeding nearby was attracted and swallowed the rattlesnake in one bite, but at the same time, Kelly was bitten on the thigh by another monster. Despite her desperate struggles, it was to no avail. Just when it seemed the family of four was about to become food, the monsters suddenly stopped their attack and left. It turned out Hugh sensed something was off and, at a critical moment, started a wood chipper nearby, the loud noise attracting all those monsters towards it. The monsters, like moths to a flame, flew into the wood chipper one after another, turning into a pile of minced meat. After the crisis was averted, Hugh and Lynn helped the injured Kelly into the house. She was in obvious pain, indicating a severe injury. Upon cutting open her pant leg, it was clear Kelly's calf was badly lacerated. Fortunately, Ally found some alcohol and cotton in the house, and they quickly tended to Kelly's wound. However, by the next day, Kelly's calf showed no signs of improvement due to the lack of antibiotics, leading to inflammation. They had to find antibiotics, or Kelly wouldn't last a few days, leaving Hugh no choice but to venture out with Ally, hoping for luck. When they stepped outside, they looked up to find the power lines covered with densely packed monsters, knowing any disturbance could lead to their instant demise. Soon, the father and daughter arrived at a nearby town, clearly long since fallen, with blood-stained cars lining the streets. They managed to find a pharmacy, but danger was also closing in. A mysterious man was watching them from not far away. As soon as they entered the pharmacy, a pungent smell hit them, and they saw several dismembered bodies. While searching for antibiotics, the mysterious man followed them inside. Fortunately, Hugh found the antibiotics, but Ally noticed something wriggling under one of the bodies. Curiously, she lifted the corpse's clothing, only to find eggs laid by the monsters, dozens of them tightly packed, and each body harbored such eggs. Just then, a hatchling attempted to break out, splashing Ally with fluid as it pierced through the skin. The sound of the hatchling quickly attracted its parents. 3 monsters, perched on the shelves, couldn't pinpoint Hugh and Ally's exact location. To capture more subtle sounds, the monsters unfolded their wings. Seeing this, the father and daughter dared not make any movements and looked around for a way to escape. That's when Ally spotted a fire sprinkler overhead and immediately had an idea, signaling her plan to her father using sign language. Hugh got the hint. His daughter wanted to trigger the fire suppression system to create noise and use the opportunity to slip away. Carefully, Ally handed a nearby mop to her father. Hugh flicked his lighter, and the faint sound immediately attracted the monster's attention. Fortunately, on the second try, he successfully lit the mop and triggered the fire suppression system. The loud noise caused the monsters to fly around chaotically, allowing Hugh and Ally to leave the pharmacy. But as they reached the street, the mysterious man blocked their way, opening his arms to show he meant no harm. For safety reasons, Hugh wanted no contact with strangers, but the man insisted on stopping them. Then he took out a notebook from his backpack, explaining his purpose. Before the disaster, the man was a preacher. He had founded a church called the Silent Order, and he wanted to invite Hugh and Ally to join. Hugh and Ally felt something strange, so they immediately rejected the Reverend and quickly moved away from him. What they didn't realize was that the Reverend didn't have a tongue. Apparently, the Silent Order involved something as extreme as cutting out one's own tongue. When they turned around again, the Reverend had disappeared. After hurriedly returning to the farm, they administered antibiotics to Kelly, and after using the antibiotics, Kelly gradually improved. Ally also received some good news through the broadcast. It was that the monsters were extremely afraid of the cold. People in the Arctic Circle had not been attacked, suggesting that the only way to avoid the disaster was to head north. However, before they could take action, they saw through the window that the Reverend had arrived at the place with a few followers. Reluctantly, Hugh went out to negotiate with him. The Reverend's purpose was very clear. He wanted Hugh's family to join them. Despite Hugh's repeated refusals, the Reverend stubbornly refused to leave, even stating that Hugh's daughter, Ally, had the ability to bear children and could help their Silent Order expand its influence. Such a twisted request thoroughly enraged Hugh. He turned around, went back inside, grabbed a shotgun, and threatened them to leave. However, the Reverend was not panicked at all, knowing Hugh dared not shoot since the noise would attract monsters, and then everyone would be finished. But the Reverend underestimated Hugh's determination to protect his family. After all, these fanatics were more terrifying than the monsters. Seeing Hugh's resolve, the Reverend didn't dare to advance, opening his mouth to reveal his cut-off tongue. This completely disgusted them. Fortunately, sensing the mood, the Reverend eventually left the farm with his followers, but he left with a sinister smile. Clearly, they would not let things go so easily. Sure enough, late at night, lightning and thunder suddenly woke Hugh up. Sensing danger, he quickly woke his sleeping family. Pulling back the door curtain, they saw a little girl standing outside. After a brief hesitation, the kind-hearted family let the girl inside the house, but they discovered the girl's face was covered in bruises, and she remained silent to all questions. Hugh pried open the girl's mouth to look, only to find she had no tongue, revealing she was also from the Silent Order. The girl looked down at her abdomen. They quickly lifted her clothes, finding her body wrapped with cell phones. At the same time, Ally noticed a cell phone stuck to a window. Just as she was puzzled, the cell phone suddenly rang, attracting a monster. The sound frightened the little girl, who immediately hid behind the couch. When they went to grab her, the cell phones on her body rang simultaneously, and countless monsters appeared outside the house, with a few breaking through the glass into the bedroom. Ally quickly ran out to close the bedroom door. Only after they removed the cell phones from the little girl and submerged them in water did the outside monsters stop their attack. But just as they breathed a sigh of relief, another cell phone ring sounded inside the house, stirring the monsters again. A cell phone was even thrown through a broken window into the room. Seeing this, Hugh urgently called his family to hide in the basement. Then he and his son tried to block the broken window. Unexpectedly, the cultists took the opportunity to sneak into the house, capturing Ally in an attempt to forcibly take her away to bear children for them. Kelly, grabbing a hammer, rushed up to stop them but was knocked down with a kick. Watching her daughter fall to the ground, Lynn didn't hesitate to chase after her. She clung fiercely to two cultists, allowing Ally to break free from her restraints. Another person attempted to pursue but was also held back by Lynn grabbing his leg. Seeing Ally was safe, and to hold back these cultists, Lynn resolutely screamed, attracting nearby monsters. Ultimately, Lynn sacrificed herself, taking several cultists with her to their deaths. But before Ally had time to grieve, the Reverend, hiding in the shadows, once again had people capture Ally. As they left, the Reverend specifically reminded them not to make any noise, leaving Hugh seething with rage but daring not to act rashly. In the moment of crisis, Hugh suddenly discovered that the deafening sound of thunderstorms disoriented the monsters, so he immediately led his family to fight back. Under the cover of the storm, Kelly charged forward, injuring the cultists and rescuing her daughter. Hugh followed closely, throwing a punch at the Reverend and using the gun barrel to pin the Reverend firmly to the ground. In the midst of the crisis, Ally picked up a rock and smashed it hard against the cultist. In the end, the cultist was killed by a knife from Kelly, who had risen to his feet. Hugh also used the butt of the gun without hesitation to kill the Reverend. To survive in this post-apocalyptic world, one must be tougher than others, but at the same time, retain a hint of humanity. Watching the mother and daughter from a distance, they did not pursue to kill but turned and left the place. To avoid attacks from the monsters, the family once again embarked on the path of escape. They headed north, and after a long journey of climbing mountains and fording rivers, they finally reached the cold north and the refuge humanity had established there. No one knows whether the monsters will evolve to adapt to the cold climate, but humanity, since its inception, has always been evolving and can likewise adapt to this silent apocalypse.